This is my heater. I dare you to hit it.
He'll be sorry.
You want the heater? I'll give it to you.
Basketball, maybe they don't hit it.
A swing and a drive to deep right.
Clear the deck. Cannonball coming.
Left field. It is out of here.
What up? What good? What good? What's good? We're back. Baseball Unstitched. Can't speak, but what's new? And you know we're not editing that out because that's not how we roll. Flax, you got to play a ton of golf this week and watch some spring training games. How you been? How was the weekend?
Week was very good. Shout out one of my boys. We were at his bachelor party in Florida. Went to a Tigers Braves spring training game. Hour 55 minutes, 0-0 tie. Exactly what you draw up. And then I was able to get to a national spring training game. Astros, that's who they played. It was great. I got to see James Wood, Dylan Cruz, C.J. Abrams, Josh Bell. Pretty much saw the starting lineup for the Nats with Trevor Williams on the mound. He was blowing 89 right by guys. Pretty impressive to see. Changeup was nasty. So all in all, pretty solid week of baseball and golf for me.
I love it. And listen, you've seen me blow 89 past people before back in our heyday. So like it must have been pretty cool to see Trevor Williams do something you saw me do at one point in time.
We literally, my grandfather goes, how is he doing that throwing so slow? And I was like, yeah, he gets it.
Good pitcher. Good pitcher. That's really what it comes down to. If you could pitch, guys. It's just how it works. Velo is not nearly as important as they've tricked you into thinking. It's just how it rolls.
Yeah.
So we got a good show for you guys today. We're going to rock and roll. We had some action this weekend. In fact, I had a whole outline that was getting ready to be written up, and then the Guardians decided to do something. The Blue Jays, the Guardians again. There was a lot of stuff going on this week. So we're going to talk about two extensions that happened this past week in baseball. We're going to talk about two trades, both of them being 1-for-1s, which is a little bit more rare than people realize. We're going to talk about both those a little more in depth. And then, of course, a favorite topic right now in all of MLB baseball is Cam freaking Smith. The dude is on a tear, and I don't know, Flax, might be making the roster for the Houston Astros.
Yeah, I think he's done everything he needs to after getting traded in that Kyle Tucker move over to Houston, a third baseman coming over to Houston in that with Isaac Paredes. Just has really done everything you'd need to do. I don't see a reason why they wouldn't have him shift out to right field and put him on the roster.
Yeah, and Dave recording, the Astros are currently playing, or they were today playing a minor league team back home, I believe, in Minute Maid. And he was in the lineup in the outfield with Jordan DHing. So signs seem to be pointing towards Cam Smith potentially making the roster. But we're going to go more in depth with that later. Where do we start the show today? And it's not home runs, people. Let's talk about some of the best stories out of spring training. We're going to do two quick hits here. Flax, go ahead and start. I know you're really excited about this Aussie.
Yeah, I love the Aussie invasion, as we're calling it, into college baseball, Major League Baseball. But Curtis Mead put on some pounds. We talked about this in another episode. He added a little bit of muscle, and boy, did it show. 14 games in spring training. He slashed 538, 617, 641. I almost don't understand those numbers. It's absolutely insane what he did. A 242 WRC plus, a 606 batting average on balls in play. It was too much for the Rays to not put him on the opening day roster. So one of the best stories we saw out of spring training was him finally getting the word that he was making that opening day roster. I know you've got one from the White Sox, which we seem to talk a lot about every single week. But I want to hear about it from you.
Listen, as two guys who like to put on their GM caps, they're a great team to talk about because they have to do only that for the next X amount of years. Shane Smith, reliever for the Chicago White Sox, he actually came over as a Rule 5 pick from the Milwaukee Brewers. Great video on X, Twitter, the Bird app, whatever we're calling it nowadays, of him calling his family to let them know he did in fact make the roster. Earned his spot, 3.38 ERA over 10.2 innings. He didn't give up a home run, and he had 9.82 Ks per 9. And throughout his minor league career, too, he's always been a guy who's been a 9 or above in Ks per 9. So good stuff. End of the day, really happy to see a Rule 5 guy make the roster, earn their way on. Really important for us to remind people, do we absolutely agree that spring training numbers are not necessarily indicative of what you're going to get during the regular season, that's a true statement. However, only way to make a roster is put up production numbers in spring training, and that's what both of these guys did. And it is really fun to see them getting their opportunity.
Yeah, I love seeing Rule 5 guys make the roster because when it comes down to it, they're in a really tough position. You can look at it one of two ways, really. They're in the best possible position when it happens, and then they're in the toughest possible position when it comes to the end of spring training because the organization has to make a decision. Are they going to drop them, put them on waivers, or are they going to add them to the major league roster? That's really the only options there are. So if you can do enough to force the team's hand, which we've seen in the past, it's a great story because you've now gotten yourself an opportunity. And if you do well enough, the team tends to let you hang around for a pretty long time and give you a longer leash because they don't want you falling into somebody else's hands. So really nice to see for Shane Smith. I think he's in a great organization to try and take that and run too.
Absolutely agree. Could be a very, very good start to a hopefully long major league careers. We'd love to see from everybody. So good stories. We're going to do our little shout out here anyways. Gavin Sheets made the roster. Just reminding everybody, got to do it. Talked about it on episode
we knew
1 of
this
the
was
pod.
coming.
And we definitely did. Happy to see Gavin Sheets get an opportunity in San Diego.
Yeah, I mean, he ripped the cover off the ball in spring training. 6 home runs in a 7-day stretch. That'll make people's ears perk up.
There's a lot of people who would make rosters if that could be a consistent factor, and
Yeah.
It's not easy to do, people. So moving right along here, we had a couple extensions happen right at the end of the week. I liked both of them. I think we loved one, and we're a little iffy on the other. But hey, we'll talk about why, and we're going to start with the one we love, and that's Tanner Bibee getting a 5-year extension with the Cleveland Guardians. 5-year, $48 million extension. Great move, in my opinion, overall. Doing their best to keep together a young core. This deal is going to buy out his final year of rookie contract, or his final year of league minimum. Yeah. All 3 years of his arbitration, 1 free agency year for sure, and potentially a club option to give the Guardians 2 of his free agency seasons. Again, why are we telling you that? It's going to keep Bibee on a Cleveland roster for potentially 2 more years than they would have had him if they just continued with the way things were, and has given them pricing stability across the term of the contract. Flax, tell us a little bit more about Bibee. What do you like?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of this move from both sides. We've talked about deals like this. I think the Lawrence Butler one comes to mind just from the standpoint of giving yourself financial stability, giving yourself control within yourself and what you can do as a pitcher, but also from the Cleveland perspective, knowing your price control. What's really important about that is now Cleveland knows where they're situating money year over year. They know how they can control that effort. And it's a pretty easy contract to move if Bibee stumbles midway through, but has the upside trending to maybe go somewhere and help somebody else. The important thing to remember is his age. He's a little bit older for where he's at in his contract pacing, which means towards the end of it, it might be worthwhile for them to move him if they've got younger players coming in. That wouldn't be a shock for this Guardians organization that is a pitching factory if there ever was one. So I like it for both sides. I think there's a lot of really interesting things to dig into here, but I'm more first, I guess, interested in your thoughts on Bibee as a player and where he fits within the Guardians rotation, where you kind of see his ceiling.
Yeah, I love Bibee. I love him since he came up. The guy's got great stuff, very intelligent ball player. Look, we're talking about a guy who, he fits everything that Cleveland likes to do with pitching. He's above average in league when it comes to extension, which is, for those of you who do not know, extension is basically how far or how close to the plate a player is releasing the ball. Why is that important? The closer you release the ball to the plate, the faster it gets on the hitter. Therefore, it can make 95 look like 98. It can also help guys who have great run on their fastballs be even harder to hit. So that's why Cleveland likes it. Bibee fits that mold. Additionally, too, last year, Bibee's strikeout and walk rate were both top 25% in the league. Bibee's arsenal also fits something that Cleveland loves, which is, with the good extension, having elite fastballs, maybe more than one in this case. His cutter had a 13 run value last year, and his fastball has previously been much less hittable, did struggle a little bit in 2024 with how hittable the fastball was. However, we're talking about a guy who, from a culmination of what he does, the fastball cutter combo is already elite. The cutter actually plays with more horizontal break than vertical break, making it almost, as Jackson told me the other day, and I agree with, a quote-unquote baby slider. And what is he adding to his arsenal potentially this year? A sweeper. Four-seam fastball, cutter baby slider, sweeper. This is something that you can really, really play on heavily as a pitcher. He does also boast a changeup that he can put behind this. So, love what Bibee's got. I love the competitiveness of this guy from an overall standpoint. He was hurt going into the playoffs last year, still immediately made the start that he could against the Tigers and battled through that start without the command he normally has and came in big for his team. So this is a very, he strikes me as a blue-collar Cleveland type player. He fits
absolutely.
The place where he plays, and I love this.
I also think that, I talked about price controllability from both sides. I also think that for him, knowing that he fits along the same path from an arbitration perspective as some guys that maybe even are at a higher level than he's at right now, a guy that comes to mind for me is Dylan Cease. Yeah. If you look at Dylan Cease last 2 years of arbitration, he got $8 million and now he's getting $13 million. Bibee's contract puts him around $7 million in his second year of arbitration and $10 million in his last year of arbitration. That's offset by knowing he's getting $20 million the next year. Realistically, and foregoing a year of free agency at a little bit of an older age. But realistically, he's earmarking himself slightly lower than Dylan Cease, which I don't disagree with, right? We live in a day and age where we play by the strikeout. He's a little bit less of a strikeout pitcher than Dylan Cease is. Hitters are really good. If you're a guy who gets a lot of balls in play, or more balls in play than somebody else, you have a potentially higher likelihood of getting hit around here and there. I don't think that's going to happen to him. I think his stuff is really good. I think he mixes it really well, but the likelihood is just slightly higher. I think that follows contract suit with a guy who has gone down the arbitration route, going to free agency, and probably going to make within that $20 million range once he hits free agency anyways. So I think it's, when you look at it, a pretty correct number across the board, just locked in. So if Bibee ends up being a Cy Young Award winner, Cleveland ends up getting him for a lower price point. If he ends up being what he's consistently been, I think everybody's shaking out pretty fair here.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they did a great job structuring the contract. And then the other thing I do want to add here is something that, while I had the opportunity to be a heavy part of Cleveland baseball living in the area, is the stigma that Cleveland... the rightful stigma that Cleveland is not willing to spend money to keep their players. They've showed us a little bit different of a trend over the last 5 years, which I think is very positive for Cleveland sports fans. And the reason why is this. Bibee, Jose Ramirez, Emmanuel Clase, Andres Jimenez, Miles Straw. Those are 5 contracts that they've all signed within what I love to consider, and we've talked about, that Atlanta Braves type structure, that Houston Astros type structure, which is let's steal a couple years and let's keep these guys in Cleveland to extend our window. Now, first thing everybody's going to say to me, well, Ryan, where's Jimenez and where is Straw? You're right. They're both on the Blue Jays. By the way, both are going to make the roster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Throwing that out there. However, were those contracts technically not what Cleveland wanted? Absolutely. But look at Jose Ramirez's team-friendly deal and the way they structured his. Look at Emmanuel Clase's deal, now one of the best closers in baseball. The reality of the situation is 50-50 for a team that is not normally willing to spend money, and just getting into the realm of how to do this is not a terrible mark to hit. It's a lot tougher than people realize to be right about these things. I'm excited to see Cleveland being willing to extend windows and spend money.
Yeah, I want to be clear about something, though. Is it a rightful stigma that they don't like to spend money, right? Look at their payroll. We can call it that.
Sure.
I think they're smart spenders. And I only say that because they've consistently been competitive. If they hadn't been competitive in those years, if they hadn't pieced together teams that went a long way, had they not put the right people in control to build the culture, to go the right direction, right? If you don't put a guy like Stephen Vogt as the manager backing up culture that already existed, I don't think you continue down that path. But the reason I say I think they spend money smartly is they were able to move those 2 contracts that they didn't necessarily like. That's hard to do. It's really hard to sign extensions and move those contracts with guys unless they're already really high-profile players. And so I think when you look at it, you could say, yeah, 50%, but realistically, they've made something of those 2 moves by getting players back in return that I think will probably net them success down the line.
I think you could consider them smart spenders for the way they've spent since probably the Encarnacion signing and after.
Yeah,
I would tell
that's
you
probably
that,
the good one to use.
I would probably tell you that prior to that is where the stigma was earned. And I don't disagree that the Jimenez and Straw contract, because they were able to get them both completely off the book, neither of them are bad. However, the player that they thought they were signing did not end up being the player they got. So,
you would like the player to just play to his contract and not have to move him
again,
more than anything.
It's hard, right? The team, Jose Ramirez was not happy about them moving one of his better friends on the roster. However, it was the right move for Cleveland at the time. So either way, we could harp on this one for a hot second. Fangraphs has Tanner Bibee projected at 10-9 with a 3.68 ERA, 171 Ks, 9.19 Ks per 9 innings, and 2.54 walks per 9. The guy's got a chance to be a top-end rotation guy for Cleveland. I think that those numbers are fairly safe for him, too, to be completely honest with you. I could see Bibee much closer to a 3, and he might strike out more than people think. The stuff is very good, and if he truly can get this sweeper added, we're going to see some dirty stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. Like you said, they're safe numbers. I think you'll always see those safe numbers.
His
from
data set's
our
not huge,
from
to
our
be fair.
projections.
His data set's also not huge, to be fair.
That's what I was just gonna say. Like, he doesn't have a lot to go off of, and it has been necessarily not flat.
I would agree.
And so you're always gonna get something safe coming out of that. I mean, I think you'd look at like a Verlander or a Scherzer projection and you'd say, that's probably, not what you expect out of a 42-year-old arm, right? Like it's all relative to the context of that. And I think you and I probably were both about to hit on that same context anyways.
Totally agree. Moving right along here. Alejandro Kirk, 5-year, $58 million extension with the Toronto Blue Jays. The Blue Jays have bought out his final year of arbitration and 4 years worth of what would quote unquote be his free agency. Looks like they're trying to lock some guys up and prove to Guerrero that they're willing to keep people around him and spend money. How about we let you talk about Alejandro Kirk, Flax?
I don't love that Danny Jansen is still not a Blue Jay.
No.
Like, to be quite honest with you, I never completely understood the rub. I thought he was a very solid defender, absolutely a good arm behind the plate. And when it came down to it, I felt like a more consistent production bat. I think that Alejandro Kirk has his streaks where you literally cannot get him out. The trouble is having a runner that he is be a singles merchant doesn't really net you a whole lot from a run value perspective. His defense, as we've seen, has absolutely improved. It's gotten exponentially better.
Top 3 catcher in baseball last year defensively.
Right. It's gotten exponentially better, but I still don't love this contract. And I think one of the biggest things that I thought of immediately, and the reason I bring Danny Jansen into the conversation, both because he was the split guy with Kirk, but also because he is now moved on a 2-year with a split option deal. If he has a better year than Kirk, he's going to opt out of that current contract he's in and go sign this contract, right? Like, I think Kirk has now set a precedent for a guy to not necessarily have to be a great offensive production bat and still get a pretty substantial extension for what I think he's bringing to the table.
I think that's completely fair. Look, the one thing that you get with Kirk, in my opinion, outside of what was extremely good defense, let's put some context into that. He was the 98th percentile in fielder run value last year behind the plate. Okay, this is a guy who can handle a pitching staff. His framing metrics put him at top 3 to top 5 in the league. One of the guys we've talked about with how good of a framer they are is Francisco Alvarez, of which he was 2 points better against Baseball Savant than Alvarez in framing grade. And additionally, too, he threw out 32% of the people that ran on him last year, which puts him 5th in the MLB. So throw it out the window. There's no question about the fact that he's a good defender. I would agree with Flax that when you're looking at a contract that is $58 million, the question tends to come to offense. What I do like about Kirk is this. Chase rate and K rate are near top of the league on a regular basis. No, Kirk is not going to bang the ball gap to gap like a crazy man or hit the ball over the fence. However, you are consistently getting my favorite statement in baseball, a professional at bat from Kirk on a regular basis. The bust projections for 2025 have him slashing 254, 331, 385. Yeah, that is barely over a 700 OPS. Let's be clear. 9 home runs, 16 doubles, 45 RBIs. This is also split time, guys. I think this is around 110 games for him. Yeah. So keep in mind that's where the number fluctuation is. However, when we give you those offensive production numbers, you may also look at this. And now this is a guy who we're projecting at a 315 WOBA, right? So you're going to look at these production numbers and say, I don't know if I give 58 million total to this guy. He is a barely above league average hitter at 315 WOBA. League average last year was 310. So I would agree with you that there's two halves to this conversation. I think a lot of this has to do with keeping a guy who more than likely, I don't know this for a fact, has a good relationship with Guerrero. He's a guy Guerrero would want on the team, and you are showing Vlad that you are going to spend the money on the people to keep Guerrero, and you're going to keep this core around him. I think the one person that is off the table for the Blue Jays to keep is Bichette. I think they're willing to keep anybody else that makes a lot of sense moving forward to try to prove to Guerrero that this is the team and the place for him to be.
Yeah, I think that's got to be a big part of it here, right? And it's also the Toronto tax. We've talked about this over and over again, Absolutely. Right? Like the guys that they're going to easily extend will never, ever, ever be the premier guys. And I don't mean that negatively towards Alejandro Kirk, right? He is unequivocally one of the better, like factually speaking, one of the better defenders behind the plate in baseball. One of, if not the hardest position to play on the field. With that being said, the combined capability of him between offense and defense does not make him a premier player. For a guy like him to get an offer like this, that's never getting turned down. But the Toronto tax of being able to maybe overpay, get a guy settled, and show the rest of your team you're willing to spend the money comes into play here, and I think you're exactly right. I think that's a big, big part of it when it's all said and done.
I would agree, and I can't blame them for that. I think there's a level of forward thinking that has to happen. I think there's a need for them to find a way to keep Guerrero. We already know what that saga has looked like so far. But again, moving the conversation just for the sake of it, because he has earned the right to have another contract in general, and the extension is Kirk. Overall, good ball player. Definitely don't want that to be missed upon people from a offensive or defensive standpoint.
No.
And I don't think you are either. I think it's more of a, will Kirk play more like the 2022 version of himself from a standpoint of his bat,
right,
or the 2023? And the reason why we say that, and this is something we've talked about a couple different times in the podcast, is 2022 Kirk absolutely broke out. He was on a tear type player. I believe his OPS was right in the 800 range. If we had him do that in 23 and 24, this conversation is completely different. It's just what it is. However, 2023 was his worst season. Why? Because the MLB did what it does better than every league in the entire world. It adjusted to Kirk.
Yeah.
2023, Kirk struggled, did not adjust back. 2024, his analytical metrics were better than 23, showing us that he's making an adjustment back. However, there is a portion of this $58 million contract where Kirk will need to, again, regress back up towards the 2022 mean to really deserve this contract in the long run, because offense is king in baseball. It's just how it works.
Kudos to him, though. Look at that roster.
Yeah.
They've got, 4 different pitchers that are now still on contract for the next 3 to 4 years. He went and made himself indispensable.
Absolutely.
Defensively. He earned the contract by making him the go-to guy for Gossman, Barrios, now Francis Bowden, and a couple others that are in that rotation to the point at which he's not going anywhere, right? Like, kudos to him. He knew his offense wasn't going to be it. He knew the trajectory for what 2022 was, especially coming off 2023, that he needed to just be indispensable defensively, and he did it very well.
And to put context to that, he was a negative run value defender his first 2 years in the league, and then has now become a over 10 run value defender the last 2 years, or 2 of the last 3
that's
years.
insane.
So, yeah, kudos up to Alejandro Kirk. We hope the contract ends up working out for both sides, and there's one thing I can guarantee to everybody here. We gonna find out. That's how it works. Let's move on to the trades that happened the week before opening day, and by golly, 2 1-for-1s is just not. This is the kind of thing that we all do on MLB The Show, where we're like, yo, it'd be sick if we traded this guy for this guy and nothing else.
This is what's happening in our Dynasty Fantasy League right now. Just like, hey, you like this guy? I like this guy. Let's switch them.
Wheeling and dealing is there's a lot of that happening. So let's start with one that I found very interesting, I think is a great conversation point, which is the Colorado Rockies trade Nolan Jones to the Cleveland Guardians in exchange for one of his best friends, Tyler Freeman, a utility infielder, outfielder, super utility guy for the Guardians over the last X amount of years. And just so everybody's aware, they were FaceTiming each other to tell each other that they thought they might be getting traded till they realized they had gotten traded for each other. There's a video of Freeman talking about this. Kind of cool. That's like 2 teams trading Flax and I, and we weren't ready for it. I don't know.
That'd be crazy.
Love it. Flax, thoughts on this before we dive too crazy in?
I think you and I are kind of on different pages with this, and I love that for us.
I do too.
I think that I see Nolan Jones' ceiling as being a little higher than Tyler Freeman's. And I think for me, that's why I don't understand it. I think that there were probably other moves that could have been made to fill a Taro Estrada gap, which is what this is intending to do.
There's a high
all
amount
things
of
aside.
it for sure, yes.
Right. Knowing that Freeman on the back end is going to be able to do a lot of other things for you in the midst of that. In my mind, like, Nolan Jones isn't the guy you move. And I think for 2 reasons. One, and we talked about it last week, his relationship within the organization to Bud Black, to the organization itself, was very, very close. His last year was very difficult. Then he had his first kid, and the team was really big as a part of that for him and helping make his season better. And then you saw his results get exponentially better once that all happened, and he was able to come back healthy the last 2 months of the year. So to turn around and use him in this way, I mean, it shows you the business of baseball. Absolutely. More than anything, right? Like, it's, to me, I don't really love it from that standpoint. I think he's kind of a guy you could have rode with. He could have ended up being that veteran for the rest of the younger guys, having kind of been through some tough times and now on the right road ahead. But honestly, when it's all said and done, I think the Guardians got away with one here. I think if Nolan Jones can stay healthy and he's back where he started, they basically created a 2-year rental program for a guy that they loved right out of the gate.
Yeah, well, and to boot, the big piece that they got back from the Rockies was Juan Brito, who did not make the roster as the starting everyday second baseman. But there's a lot of reasons why I actually think this is a good move for both sides personally, and that's really simple for me. Though I totally agree that Jones comes with a very high level of upside. I mean, he's a guy who in 2023 was a 2020 guy. He has arguably the best arm in all of baseball. I mean, it's impressive for anybody who's never got to see it in person. But I think both teams were very, very pointed in what they were trying to do here. And that's pretty simple for me. The Rockies knew they needed to do 2 different things. One, they needed to unblock the logjam they had in the corner outfield spot. How they did that was their choice. In this case, it was moving Nolan Jones. Next, they knew they had to fill a gap with Thairo Estrada, but also potentially go out and get a guy who, one, had upside, and two, even with a healthy Thairo Estrada, would earn our spot on the roster through being a super utility guy. I think they got that in Freeman. So I think the Rockies went out and got everything they wanted. The Guardians, on the other hand, said, yes, we'll give you Freeman, and yes, we'll take the upside with a guy that we know very well and has been part of this organization before. And what do the Guardians need help with? Well, that's simple. They needed the right platoon pat for everybody's favorite Big Christmas in right field. What did they get? A great left-handed platoon bat for Big Christmas in right field. So, yeah, from a standpoint of roster construction, I feel as if both teams did the right thing and won here. And a couple things I'd like to talk about on Freeman as we go, but let's stick with Jones since that's where we started here. 2023 for Jones was extremely promising, a 137 WRC plus, and back to my favorite stat in the world, a 395 WOBA. 395 WOBA last year would have ranked him in the top 20 players in all of baseball.
Yeah, it's way
maybe
above
top
league average.
15. So we're talking about a guy who has the ability to do it, but also you brought up the injuries. Jones has struggled his entire career to stay healthy. This is not a new thing for him. And unfortunately, the injury that he's dealing with is a lingering back injury. And we both know that that's something that could stay around. We don't want it to, but it doesn't mean it's something that we're not going to not bring it up because it is part of the conversation in the situation here.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's unfortunately one of those injuries that's not really diagnosable. I saw somewhere in an interview that he did that he did find a couple other guys who struggled with the same thing, both past and present, was able to kind of work through them a little bit and create a little bit of a support system to figure out how to prepare his body, prepare himself, and get through 162 to the point where it wasn't a big deal. But again, that's not saying he's solving the problem. That's saying he's learning to live with the problem. That doesn't scream valuable upside. So absolutely, it should be a part of the conversation when it's all said and done. I think the thing that you and I disagree with most around Nolan Jones is how the Rockies are choosing to backfill that corner outfield spot.
Yeah, no. And this is a point of contention for me right now. In fact, we came on to do this pod today, and I was pretty fiery about this situation. And I made one major point here that was very important for me and why I like this deal, and that was the Rockies doing what they needed to do to unjam the log, as I'm going to call it, which is they had too many corner outfielders who were high upside that they needed to get at bats. Zach Veen won the spring training MVP. You trade Nolan Jones to make room for a potential 23-year-old, high upside, potential middle-of-the-order all-star. And then you option him to AAA?
Yeah.
What are we doing here? Like that's my problem with this deal. And listen, Nick Martini had one hell of a spring. However, they did the Jake Cave instead of Jordan Beck thing last year. Beck finally got to come up and broke his wrist. Why? Because he was probably playing at 110 miles an hour trying to make sure he didn't ever get demoted again. Okay, this is, to me, this is where I have a problem with the situation. Jones, moving him is fine because, in my opinion, you look at Beck and Veen and you go, I believe these are two guys with the same type of ceiling, so I'm willing to move Nolan Jones for something that we need now and potentially in the long term. However, Veen not starting opening day, I have a problem with that. I just do.
I'll explain my reasoning and why I would do the same thing.
Okay.
Veen needs regular everyday at-bats.
Sure.
So does Jordan Beck.
Yeah.
But Jordan Beck has already been there, so his clock's already running. So Jordan Beck is absolutely getting one of those spots. Martini does not have options. Played well enough this spring to earn an opportunity. Hilliard does not have options. Sean Bouchard has one option. So in my mind, when I'm looking at these situations, where can I put Veen where he's going to get every day at bats? I'm not wasting somebody who has no options. I'm giving them an opportunity. You know what your outlook is for the season as a team, right? It is a very unique situation to only a few teams like the Rockies. I think the White Sox are in a similar situation. I think there are a couple others that are also in a similar situation. Zach Veen needs at-bats. He's going to play every single day and get at-bats in AAA. as soon as one of those guys with no options or one option isn't doing something worthwhile, Zach Veen will be up as long as he performs early on in AAA. And I think a lot of people are going to sit here and say this is service time manipulation. They're waiting until the right moment. Then they're going to option Bouchard, who has an option to be sent down, and then they're going to bring Veen up. Martini will go to the bench as the fourth outfielder, and Veen will get every day at bats at the big league level, which you could do. Totally worthwhile, could do. But why not let Martini keep trying to go, which is a very similar situation that he had in Cincinnati last year? If he does fall off the table and doesn't bring it to the ballpark every single day like he was in spring training, then he gets DFA'd. Zach Veen comes up. Question over. To me, that's why you do what you do, because you don't need to start the clock yet when you have as many options as you have.
Yeah, I mean, my disagreement is two different things, and this is just how I look at it. One, you're going to purposely end up creating a Super 2, which saves you no money and saves you no time, in my opinion. And then
you're paying 4 years of arbitration.
Right. And then additionally to creating yourself a Super 2 and a team that already doesn't love to spend money, is proven by a lot of different things, is going to now have to spend money again to keep Veen for one more additional year. Let's not forget, too, that they have the opportunity to add themselves a right at the end of the first round pick for a guy winning Rookie of the Year. And let me tell you, with the crop of players in that group this year, if you don't have a guy on your opening day roster who's going to be there to beat out somebody like a Dylan Cruz who's going to get an opportunity to play from day one, you're not going to even give yourself an opportunity to get that pick, even if you burn their rookie year of eligibility. So again, to boot,
yeah, I don't disagree.
This also hurts me because you still did give away probably your second highest upside outfielder from a standpoint of somebody who's shown it. Doyle is heads above everybody, and it's just what it is because Bretton Doyle's a freak, and it's awesome. However, Nolan Jones, we just talked about it, was a 2020 guy who had a 395 WOBA in 2023. To me, moving that guy and then giving your fans Martini, Bouchard, and Hilliard in that corner outfield spot, it doesn't make sense to me. So I agree with you that there is a way to start clocks the right way, and I'm never going to play like that's not part of it. It's just really hard for me to rationalize why you make that move and then a day later not bring up your spring training MVP.
I guess I'm coming from more of a GM's standpoint. I think if I'm thinking about it from a coach like Bud Black standpoint and what you're giving him to work with, I'd be pretty pissed.
Sure.
Like in my mind, if that's the case, put Sean Bouchard in AAA. Give me Zach Veen. I'm going to put Martini and Hilliard on the bench. Both of those guys have no options. I don't care. Zach Veen, Jordan Beck, Brenton Doyle are my outfield. I'm running out there every day. I'm not thinking twice about it. And they're going to figure it out or not. Right? Like, I don't disagree with you from that standpoint. But when you start thinking about the other thing, and you and I talked about this, and this is a horrible thing to say, but if you do want to talk in the sense of service time manipulation, getting 4 years of arbitration out of Veen means that you have more time to potentially move him for pieces. You give him more opportunities where his contract stays at a lower value potentially than he would free agency, and you could move him in year 2 or 3 of arbitration rather than right at year 4.
Again, this is just where we're going to disagree, and I only say that because I think this is a stupid move from a general manager standpoint too, and I'll say it flat out. This does not make sense for the composition of your roster and your roster. In my opinion, the composition of their roster, this just doesn't make sense across the board. The Nolan Jones trade is not the problem I have here. I think the Nolan Jones trade is just fine. We move back to Tyler Freeman here real quick. He played 4 different positions last year, including 731 innings in center, 41 at short, 26 at second, 19 at third. He's a guy who throughout the minor leagues has shown a high contact skill. His slash line in the minors, 313, 384, 430, 434. This is a guy who has great bat to ball skills. We're now bringing him to Colorado, where the reality of the situation is it is this much easier to hit in Colorado. And for all of you who don't know, this much in terms of Major League Baseball is like a freaking football field. It really is. Okay? So there's a possibility all of a sudden Freeman's a consistently 275 hitter at the big league level with a 750 OPS, and everybody's like, wow, that made a lot more sense than I thought. So again, this move to me for the Rockies hinges on what they've done after, and I personally do not agree with the outfield not being Veen, Doyle, and Beck. And if it wasn't going to be like that, you could have left Veen down all year and just kept Nolan Jones, and nobody would have had a word to say about it.
Well, let me ask you this question. So realistically, you could say first month of the year, first month and a half, whatever it is, till Estrada's back. Freeman's going to play second base every day with McMahon and Tovar.
Yep.
You've got Martini, or you've got a carousel in right field, left field, whatever it is you want to call it, wherever Beck's not. And when Estrada comes back and takes his second base spot over, Freeman takes over that corner outfield spot. In that same sense, Sean Bouchard, who's got an option, probably goes down to the minor leagues. Why would you have Veen in that situation where he's then in a position battle with a guy you've now traded for?
You have to prove to me that that's actually what's going to happen first, because I don't think it will. If that's what happens, I'll take all of it back. Because that means Veen probably stays in the minors until about September. He comes up, we don't burn service time, we don't burn roster time, and Veen gets an opportunity to again make the roster in 2026. However, let's flip all of this back. Former first-round pick, right? We don't know what this does to the relationship of the guy who you just handed the friggin' MVP of spring training award to, traded the guy blocking him, and didn't bring him up. We talk about the relationships of players and teams all the time. I would hope that this would not hurt something like that, but how do we know, right? It's kind of where we're going with this. Of, I don't disagree if your plan is to then put Freeman in right field and Veen doesn't see a ton of the field this year. I'm not fighting you. But my problem is I don't think that's what they're going to do.
No, I just threw that scenario out there because as we were talking about, like, that could be because we know the process that they went through of making these moves, and that could be the decision making of going after a utility guy instead of a second baseman. But again, it all hinges on the fact that, like, you shouldn't be waiting till 2026 to give Veen his opportunity.
I would totally agree.
But you also should be giving him his opportunity in a situation where he is getting to play every day and getting at bats. If his opportunity is not that, then you're wasting his initial opportunity in the big leagues.
That we can both agree on. And I think what frustrates me is they had the avenue to give him that, and they themselves made the decision to shut that down, which is tough for me because, again, you moved the blocker. So either way, love it. Every once in a while we disagree, just in case you guys were curious. I'm sure some of you have thought that we don't, but we do.
Those conversations are usually the ones that go on for a little bit.
Let's move into the final trade of the weekend. That was a 1-for-1 Ian Anderson to the Los Angeles Angels for one Jose Suarez, a left-handed relief pitcher who will now be going to the Atlanta Braves. Interesting move here. I didn't totally understand the move, if I'm being honest with everybody. It seems like both teams just liked the player that they got, and I think that's a completely fair reason to make a trade, but you just traded a right-handed swingman for a left-handed swingman, and neither team needed those things, if that makes sense. Well, the Angels might have needed a starter. However, the Braves have three different left-handed arms, so, like, I think the Braves just like Suarez, which is great, but it's an interesting situation. So give me your thoughts, because Ian Anderson's an interesting one, and you have some good stuff on him.
Well, so I did kind of think of it as Braves needing one more left-handed arm in the bullpen, to be quite honest. And I think that they didn't know what was next for Ian Anderson. And so he was an easy guy to move. When you look at the Angels depth chart, having another right-handed swingman who could be a long relief guy, I don't think is a bad thing to have. My biggest struggle with Ian Anderson is what he's struggled with the last 2 years. He walked 20 guys in 20 innings pitched in spring training. And we don't like talking about spring training stats. They are small sample sizes. But that's an odd stat in a small sample size.
Yes.
If it was 5 innings, 5 walks, I'd say, he's working on stuff. But 20 innings, 20 walks. But here's the craziest part. He had a 119 batting average against. So when he's throwing, he's not getting hit. But it's got to be somewhere around the zone. Like, I almost wonder if it's a level of, like, he had a really bad batting average, or really good for him batting average against, because hitters really just wanted to hit. And there was a situation where like they couldn't stand walking anymore, and guys were maybe opening up their own zone because it's spring training and they're working on stuff.
Or they're trying to make a roster, to be fair to them, right?
It's really hard to make a roster when you're just taking walks. And when you're facing a guy like Ian Anderson, it's a really good opportunity to show that you get hits against somebody who is good. And I think it was kind of leading to him getting some pretty bad swings on also some pretty bad pitches that maybe brought that number down. I think the walks scream larger to me than the batting average against does. That's scary. That's not the first time he's done this either. This has been his problem, that he cannot find the zone. And so I think when you're the Angels, if you can kind of find a way to hone it in and have him as a 1, 2, maybe 3 inning guy in your bullpen, great, right? His stuff is hard to hit. But if he's going to keep walking guys, the last thing you want in a tight game, even in a 3-4 run ball game, is for your pitcher to come out of the bullpen and the first thing he does is walk 2 guys. Because I can guarantee you that's going to lead to runs. There is no way in baseball that doesn't lead to runs. So, you know, when I look at it from the whole, I like this for the Braves better. I don't think they knew what they wanted to do with Anderson. I think getting another left-handed arm for their bullpen, and one that I think can be beneficial for them, was the right move here. There was really nothing more for them to do this offseason than continue to add bullpen depth, and took them a long time to do it, but they certainly did it.
Yeah, this is just one of those ones for me. Ian Anderson's a former first-round pick for the Braves. It's not as if they gave up on him. He had 2 years at the major league level. The first one was stellar, actually. His 2021 season was very good. Played extremely well for the Braves. However, 2022 was tough. I mean, people raked against his fastball, which you just can't have at the major league level, unfortunately, especially from the right side. One of the things that we always talk about from a data perspective is, and this is not meant to offend right-handed pitchers, but it is the truth, is there are more right-handed arms. Therefore, at the major league level, there are more below-average right-handed arms than if you look at the splits for lefties, because it is much harder to be a lefty with a smaller group of people to pick from at the major league level. It's just how it works. Keep in mind, lefties also handle reverse splits majority of their days. It's just part of what they live with, so their stuff has to be better. Righties, because of platoon splits, can end up being a little bit more below league average and still maintain. Either way, Anderson had 4 years of controllability left. I think that's the thing that confused me a little bit about this trade is Suarez only has 2. However, this goes back to something that I love to talk about, and whether I put it in here in our outline or not, is the Braves are in a win-now window. And if you're not sure what you're going to do with Anderson and you feel like a left-handed relief arm who can play a swingman type role is what you need, you know what? I can't fight you on the move. And I think that's part of why I go back to saying I think the Braves just liked what they got out of Suarez and were more than happy to move Anderson, kind of what you were getting at, out of the fact that they haven't really been able to figure him out either. Suarez, too, comes with a low IVB changeup, and what that really does is garner more swings and misses. What do we love in baseball right now? It's the strikeout. They look at something like that, and they see a pitch that can be manipulated. Additionally, too, Suarez from the left side boasts the sweeper-slider combo. Talked about this with Bibee. It's something that can play off each other, and with a 5-mile-an-hour difference, the Braves just... Ronaldo Lopez. That's not what Suarez is going to be to that level, but the Braves do have a knack of going out to get guys who are a little bit, you're not sure where they are. They move to the Braves, and the Braves are able to manipulate them into a very consistent arm. I'm still waiting for them, by the way, to just sign Jesse Chavez and him all of a sudden have a 1.9 ERA again.
It happened. They did.
Did they really?
Yeah, it did. They did. Like immediately.
Didn't know that, but not surprised.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, he pitched that. He literally pitched that day. It was hilarious.
Of course he did. And he will now go from a 7 ERA to a 1.92 and strike out the world. Because he can only pitch in a Braves uniform over the last 12 years, it feels like.
Yeah,
which is
horses for courses. Some guys are just that way.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So, nonetheless, guys, a lot of interesting stuff this week. And these rosters are getting finalized so that when you're listening to this on Tuesday, you can sit on your couch on Thursday and go, gosh darn it, that's an opening day lineup and we're playing baseball. And that's where we're getting, and that's where we're going. So very, very excited on our end. We're gonna bust through this last thing maybe, or maybe we'll go to final thoughts. What do you want to do?
I think we can get through this last one pretty quickly.
All right, so no final thoughts today, but we're going to talk about
No.
the Cam Smith conundrum. That's right. I used some alliteration. I'm cool. It's just what it is. Why are we talking about Cam Smith? Well, look, guys, Cam Smith is about to potentially make the Houston Astros roster. And oh, by the way, he's played all of 32 games at the minor league level. Flax, tell us what he did at Florida State. Because he was a dog.
Yeah, he was so good at Florida State. Slash 387, 488, 654 with 16 bombs, 22 doubles. It cannot be understated. Like, doing that in the ACC is not easy. Like, Florida State puts themselves against a tough schedule. They play tons of in-state midweeks that are really difficult too. When you think about where they're located, right? They're always going to play Florida as an in-state. They're also going to play teams like Stetson. They're going to play UCF. They're going to play USF. Those are good baseball programs.
It's like
really
California.
good arms.
That's the best way to put it,
Yeah,
guys. It's like Texas.
exactly.
Like, everybody you play is going to be quality teams.
Right. Because the guys who are from that area, who don't go to Florida and don't go to Florida State, go to these other schools. And they're all very high-quality baseball players. So I loved him in college. I like him even better now. He is a very large human being. I saw him the other day playing against the Nationals. He towers over people, and he is thick. It's going to be very fun to watch him play.
Yeah, and his rise to greatness after being a first-round pick for the Cubs last year is pretty quick. With the Cubs last year in 32 games, he slashed 313, 396, and 609. 7 home runs, 5 doubles, and just for shits and giggles, 4 triples. Okay, so in 32 games, he had, if I'm doing my math correctly here, 16 extra base hits. He was averaging an extra base hit every other game. 449 WOPA, which puts him with the likes of many elite hitters from a standpoint of major league production if we were there. 370 is where we call somebody elite. So think about a 449, putting it into context.
Yeah.
Right?
It's when I keep looking at this Kyle Tucker trade,
I know.
I understand that Houston was going to have to get someone good. And everybody's going to sit here and say, yeah, but Matt Shaw. Cam Smith and Matt Shaw could have been in the same lineup. Like,
Absolutely.
When
Is
guys
Cam Smith
hit,
going to play third this year?
no. And Cam Smith may have not played third base for
Anyways?
the Cubs. But you know who else could have played second base for the Cubs? Matt Shaw. Like, the other day in Japan, they didn't even run Nico Horner out there, right? Whatever. We don't need to keep talking about that. But my biggest thing is, like, when you start looking at this, Kyle Tucker's a great get for the Cubs. But what in the world were you doing giving the Astros a guy like that?
Well, and to boot, it's not like Paredes or Wisniewski are bad players either.
No.
And Paredes, gosh, if you didn't take him in your fantasy league this year, you probably missed out because he's going to hit 30 bombs instead of 16 bombs.
Yeah.
So, look, the Kyle Tucker trade is going to come down to exactly what we said it would the first time we had the opportunity to talk about this. Do the Chicago Cubs retain Kyle Tucker? If they don't, and they don't win a World Series this year, this is a loss. If they retain him or sign the World Series, as great as Cam Smith is, as good as Paredes will be in Houston, this is an even deal for both teams because they did truly get what they needed out of it. However, I agree with you, Flax, that we are verging on questioning whether or not this made any sense at all because this is 6 years of Cam Smith that they gave up.
Yeah. And a guy, and it's funny though because they get Brendan Rodgers, who's gonna be there. In my mind, I think he's gonna be their opening day second baseman. Now you're sticking Altuve in left, and you're getting Cam Smith in right. It's an interesting makeup, but it's a team that's gonna compete. We know they're gonna compete because that division's gonna be open anyways, and we know that they're gonna compete because they've got a good culture over there. Jose Altuve won't have it any other way. Yordan Alvarez is going to be an unbelievable middle of the order bat. And now you've got Cam Smith, who could potentially be, your 1-2 hole if he hits the way that he's hitting right now in spring training and carries it over. into his first big league season.
100%. And for anybody curious about his spring training numbers in 14 games, he's slashed 371, 450, and 771.
It's insane.
108 WRC plus, 4 home runs, 11 RBIs, and a 5.10 WOBA. Ladies and gentlemen, 5.10 WOBA. Welcome back, Aaron Judge. Now, the catch here is very
well
simple.
above league average.
Very simple. It's spring training, and the reality is, yes, it will help him make the roster, but none of it matters unless he does it in the regular season. However, if you get the opportunity to watch this guy, it's going to be hard to believe he won't. So, let's get to the question of the day before we let everybody go and hope they have a great week, and that should Cam Smith be on the roster?
Absolutely no question in my mind. They were working out drills with him today to teach him how to get balls off the right field wall. That tells me they're making plans for him to know how to play in that ballpark.
Yep, there's no questions for me either. He played a very high level of college baseball, immediately translated it to the professional level, and when given an opportunity in spring training to face minor and major league pitching, regardless of if this is people working on their stuff, he did one thing and one thing only, and he raked. And by the way, defensively, even in the outfield, looked a lot better than Altuve so far. And that's not a knock on Altuve. It is the point of Altuve is showing what the transition looks like, and it's more difficult than people want to believe. Smith is doing it with little to no problem.
Yeah, left field's a little tougher of a transition than right field is, in my mind. We've talked about this. The ball comes off the bat differently, but he is making right field look easy, and he has an arm. He has an arm to play an elite level at that position, not just play, a serviceable level at that position.
Totally agree. So I think we're both excited for Cam Smith this year. I made sure one of my buddies got him in his fantasy league, and him making the roster is going to be huge for him. So shout out to my boy. Go win some money. Past that, we're there, guys. The next time you talk to us after this one, meaningful games will have been played. I can't emphasize this enough. We're back. Opening day right around the corner. Flax, anything to say to the people before opening day happens?
Nothing. Opening day pod next week. Let's get after it.
We will be at the park for opening day here at Coors Field. If you're listening and want to come say hi, come say hi. I'm sure we'll be somewhere talking to people because that's about all we do to begin with. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. As always, this has been Baseball Unstitched. Have a great week.